Hi everyone, this is Rick Morgan and my continuing effort to preserve some of our memories and our fondest stories of comic books and keep it alive. I'm interviewing some of my viewers here on YouTube, and this is Chris Carlesco, who's kind enough to offer an interview with me. I hope you enjoy it. Here's Chris. Take care. Bye-bye. Did you get
Got
a
it.
notice that's recording?
I did.
Okay, great. Sorry.
Now we're recording.
Now we're cooking. So sorry, after a false start, this is Rick Morgan. I'm with Chris Carlesco, a comic book, I'm going to say aficionado. And I don't know if you are involved in any professional capacity with comic books yet.
No, I am not. I am
No.
a comic book fan. I am a old school collector from way back, and now I'm collecting yet again.
And so Chris previously shared with me a great story about his years of collecting comics. And he said he revealed previously he was collecting around mid to late 90s with a Copper Age collector. Is that true? Is that correct? Or
Yep,
80s,
I
I
would
mean, yeah.
say like the time that I was collecting was basically about 1985 through 1991. I'd say that's when I was heavily collecting. By heavily, most of the comics I collected were all Marvel. I was almost all Marvel, but heavily into like X-Men, Amazing Spider-Man, anything Spider-Man, anything mutant related. I really enjoyed like the all of the tie-ins. I like to see the Secret Wars is probably right around the time that I guess that might be 1984. Right around then is when I really started to like really get into it. And one of these things where, it started out kind of light and then kind of got obsessive. And
Yeah.
then eventually as I grew older, I tended to start collecting less as I started getting to the point where I'm starting to chase girls instead of chasing comics.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, of
Cars and
course,
girls have ruined a lot of comic collections. Yeah.
yep, there's car payments and jobs and trying to, and enrolled into college, and then you kind of lose touch with it. It's one of those things where some of the better memories though were of those years where I was collecting. I would say at that time I was probably around 12 to about 17 were probably the age. There's that moment where you're getting a little too old for comics, you think, and then you get over that, right?
Right. Well, you hung
I,
on to, do you have any of the original comics you bought from back then?
I,
Still, do
I
you
have
hang
all
on?
of my original comics. I don't think I haven't lost one of them. I just packed them up and put them in my mom's house and pulled them back out and finally got them back over to my house, and they've been here for years. But
Do you have an
it's one.
original car or a girl?
What's that?
Do you have an original car or a girl from the same period?
No, I do not.
Well, there you go. There you go.
No, I did not. Thank God for both those. um,
Cool. Can you share a story with us?
yeah, I was going to tell you this story is just a little bit about like what I did to like try to collect some comics back when I was in my youth. And what wound up happening is me and my friend, we would travel about 2 miles, or I think about 3 or 4 miles actually, when I think about it. Once a week on Thursdays, we'd ride our bikes down to downtown Northville, which is just a couple. It's the city next to the city I grew up in, and they had a comic book store in their little downtown area called Cartoon Alley. And we'd get there on Thursdays. It'd be like a little trek, a little religious trek we'd go on, like where every Thursday it would be him and me, and usually a couple other friends that we had that were also comic fans. That those two guys would kind of change around between a group of people, but we would always go. So we'd get there, we'd get their comics for the new comics, and they had a tiny little back issue collection that you could go through. I mean, this place was called Cartoon Alley. It was literally an alley. You'd go in, there was a register, and then the comics on one wall, and beneath it were like some bins with back issues. And if you turned around, you'd be facing a wall. There was just room for you to almost walk sideways through this place. And in any case, we'd go there weekly. We'd collect, and then we go to the candy store next door, and then ride our bikes back. Winter, summer, whatever, we did the same thing all the time. So it was this ritual thing that we loved doing. As we got older, we started branch out. Once we got to the point where we could actually drive cars, then we'd go to the bigger comic book stores. And at this point, my friend had gotten a job I think we were 15 or 16, right? He got a job at 15, and he started making some money and getting some cool comics. And then I wanted to get cool comics, but I didn't have the money to do it. And what I wound up doing is
What's a cool comic? What's a cool comic?
He actually, if I'm thinking, he's mostly a Marvel guy as well. But what he would get is like he would get like runs. He would get like, he was a big Avengers fan, so he would just collect up like a big batch of Avengers, and then he wasn't as big as he did get X-Men 140. Was it X-Men 140? I think that's the one. 140. Nope, 141. I'm sorry. And that one bothered me because I really wanted that one. That was one of the original Back to Future's Past.
Oh,
issues.
Right.
So he started like pulling these great looking comics, and I was just kind of jealous. So as a way to kind of equalize it, there was I used bad judgment, and my parents weren't really big on me collecting comics, so they weren't giving me any money to do this. So other than chore money, that's all I had. But we had an old wooden box in my attic that was given to my parents by my grandmother. It was just something she used to use to collect coins and like $2 bills, and she would just put it in this big wooden box to save for later because she thought they might have value. So there'd be all these like weird denominated dollars, and like I swear if there's a $3 bill or something that would be in there. But she had a lot of coins. She had $50, $2 coins, all these weird coins and stuff that they were all in this box, and then it was sealed and glued shut. So the only thing you could do was put stuff in. You couldn't take stuff out, and it was supposed to go to me and my sister. But it fell, and the bottom the bottom platform fell off, and there was a hole in the bottom where you could take stuff out. And I went into that thing and basically pilfered it over the course of a few months to amplify my collection. So what I wound up doing is I'd be paying for all these comics with like $2 bills and $50 and old quarters and everything that I pulled out of this thing. I didn't know how much it had in it, so I just kept on going and trickling money out into it. And eventually the thing ran out after a few months. And I
can just imagine you shaking it upside down to squeeze the last little nickel out of it.
Now the magnitude of it comes to me is like, oh my God, my sister's going to kill me because this was supposed to be for both of us. And it wasn't all that much money, but my sister believed it was like thousands of dollars. So now I had this dilemma on my hand where it's all spent. So I just took the box, and me and my friend threw it in the creek behind my house to dispose of the evidence.
It's like an episode of The Sopranos or something.
We had to bury the evidence. So the thing that was kind of funny when it comes full circle is that it turns out that those coins that were all in there were all like pre-1963 real silver coins. So I'd been paying for all my comics with like genuine silver coins, $50, $2, even the quarters. Everything that I was spending was made of real silver. So
and in reality, the store owner didn't say, "Hey, Chris, this is real silver." He didn't like stop and mention to you that it looks funny. No,
what's funny is I think since it was the 80s, my guess is people didn't even really know that much. It's probably it was only 30 some years since they stopped making silver coins. So they probably didn't even think about it. They probably just sent it into the bank. But, I do find it funny because I did use that to buy a really shabby quality version of I got an Amazing Spider-Man 129. It was missing the Marvel value stamp.
And that's the first appearance of the Punisher, for those who don't know. The first
appearance of Punisher, which was a big grail when I was growing up. And I always wanted that one. It's funny because it looks great on the front, but if you look on the back, it's got multiple water stains. And if you look inside, it's missing the value stamp. So, but I can't complain because I think I paid like $10 for it, right? So at the time, it was like $100 book. So getting it for $10, I sit there, I complain sometimes. I'm like, oh man, I wish I would have bought the good one. I couldn't have afforded the good one. So I got that. I got a Hulk 181 as well from Classic Movies and Comic Center. The
first appearance of Wolverine, for those who don't know.
The first appearance of Wolverine, again for $10, just in shabby, just pretty rough shape. But now I did get it graded recently, and it was a 4.5, so
Oh,
not
that's
as terrible
decent.
as I thought. So
Yeah, that's not
it
bad.
is funny to me to think that like the monetary value of that silver is no longer as valuable as that comic book now.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I
There
feel a
was
little bit
probably some
better.
crossover, right? From
Right.
times
There's
back and
definitely a
forth.
couple of years there where I was probably in the negative, but I think I probably overall come out on that.
Oh, yeah. That's
I,
great, man.
but in general, it was just like that's just a fun little story about like the strange things you do when you get obsessed with trying to collect things.
Yeah, I did too. I did similar kind of stuff. We had a neighbor that lived behind us that had gone to jail for mysterious circumstances. I lived in this tiny town. He was just gone. The house was abandoned. And of course, as kids, his sister like went through this house and kind of told us that he was in jail and we could save his mail for him. I'm like, whoa, what did he do? And we all, of course, made up stories about what we thought had happened and stuff. And we like snuck in his house through he had like a cat door like in his garage, and we were little enough we could sneak in. And we opened up his fridge. In the old days, they had a fridge like a metal handle in the refrigerator that would pop this metal door open, and there were like metal wire grates in there.
The
And there
locking
was
door, the reason why you have to take the doors off fridges now.
exactly. And there was a carton of milk in there that had sunk about a third of the way through those metal tines, and it was like growing down through it, and like that smell like hit me in the face. My eyes were watering. And so we were looking for stuff in this guy's house that we would somehow pilfer, and then we would sell it, at the one pawn shop in town, we thought, and we would go
Bad,
to
Rick.
the comic book store. I know, right? We were like, well, this is what we thought we were going to do. This was terrible, right? There's nothing of value in this home. I mean,
fortunately, well beneath the threshold of being tried as an adult.
Exactly. We were just sneaking around, and we would like go back. But what we did find, we found I won't go into too much detail, but we did find a stack of adult magazines. That was our first exposure, which gladly didn't veer us off of the path of comic books, And we wondered if we could sell them,
I feel bad for like kids today because like it's so easy for them, right?
Right.
Like for us, like that was like a glowing there would be like one magazine that like everybody knew about, and they'd take, okay, it's gonna stay at your house for the
this is my dad's, don't let him know.
And it could even, it wasn't even that graphic, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Just, and nowadays it's like, they can Google whatever they want.
Yeah. So
we had to fight. We had to like work for it. You had to be
exactly.
You had to feel shame.
You had to get a flashlight, like when you had to camp out at your buddy's house and stuff, you'd share them around back and forth. Exactly. I got nothing out of it except for some rotten milk and some magazines that didn't even get, exactly.
You remember the old National Lampoon magazine, which was kind of a comic almost in its own right. It was like a parody magazine, but it had like boobs in it and stuff.
They had Cracked too. Remember Cracked?
Yeah, it was like the adult version of Cracked. Right?
Yeah, exactly. I do remember that.
I mean, the same National Lampoon that made National Lampoon's Vacation and all these things, right? So I got one of those. My dad actually had one, and it was like, I brought it to school, and there was so many guys. This is like 5th grade, I think, and I mean, we didn't even like to us. This was like never seen anything like it before. So there's like 6 guys all around this one desk. They're all watching it. My teacher takes it away, and he's up in the front of the classroom, and he's reading it. I think I'm gonna die. Like he's gonna kill. This is so much trouble. He goes through the whole book like real slowly, kind of to make a point out of it, and then at the end of the class, he gives it back to me. And
really? That's really cool.
Honestly, there's no actual nudity in one of those. It's just kind of provocative.
Right.
I think he got like after going through the whole book, he's like, nah. Keep in mind, this is like the early 80s when you could get away with any type of behavior, it seems, comparatively, when it comes to that. Now I would have been in some kind of special 12-step program as a 5th grader.
Were you, did you go to any comic book conventions?
I did. I've been to a couple of when I was young. I went to some comic book conventions that smaller ones. I never got to go to like Comic-Con, or even back in the 80s. Comic-Con probably wasn't Comic-Con, but I did go to some comic book conventions. I actually been to those and some Star Trek conventions. I'm not even a big Star Trek fan, but I did like conventions, and there was comics at those too. And I loved it. I mean, to me, that was like one of the cooler things. I actually now, I take my kids to the smaller comic book conventions that are around here, and we're gonna go once. I mean, obviously, nothing's been happening for a long time, but there's some new ones coming up, and we plan on going to them. I mean, there's something about the comic book convention that it was exciting. You know, you'd go in and there'd be like so many people. And I was, sadly, in some ways, I always remember, like, if you remember The Simpsons, there's the character in The Simpsons, the comic book guy.
Yeah, right. Totally.
Me of like a lot of those comic book memories. You know, worst episode ever guy, you know. There's a couple of those guys, but it was always a great time. We'd always go through all the boxes, and back then I was a big, like, you know, box guy, just digging for treasure. Now it's like I go to a comic book store and it's sad because I go to a place that has those boxes and I just want to spend time going through all of them. When I'm too old, I have too many responsibilities. I can't sit in a store for hours flipping through books. I got, like, you know, I got a 45 minutes before I get home before my wife starts texting me about it.
Sure. I mean, I have memories of going to, like, I think at first it was like a Red Lion in a nearby town, like the banquet hall. And then later it was like at a fairground in like some back room. And then I'll explicitly remember like comic book convention, and I got a flyer. There was flyers. I saved most of these flyers up too. I think my first one was like 1980. And I think the Lone Ranger, the guy who played the Lone Ranger, I'm forgetting his name now, the actor.
Yeah. So pretty much everybody's forgotten his name.
Yeah, exactly. I forget.
You'll be forgiven.
Clayton Moore. And he was going to be at this comic book convention. I'm like, does he read comic books? I'm like, why would we care about this guy, right? And he was there. I don't know. I was like, he was actually like shilling for a car dealership or something. He just happened to be a famous person. This was my first exposure that, hey, famous people show up where there's large groups of people like to draw you there or get an autograph or whatever. And it was my first exposure. And I remember the guy at the comic book store. He used to print these little 3x5 cards with like a checklist of comic books that only went up to 200 because hardly any comics were over 200 issues at the time, right? It was like, it went up that high. You have to
crazy
get
to
think. Right, and then just check it off. And it was like, I think Spider-Man was, but just barely. This was like 212, 210 or something. And he said, look, we don't have all the comic books you want, but, you know, if you go here, you got to bring cash. And you show up here, you can like negotiate, you can actually trade with guys. People will show up like guys just like you, and they'll just like, you can buy and sell comics. And I'm like, well, this is my only opportunity. Like, kids don't know how easy they have it now today. It's like you just drag the picture of the comic book to the picture of your house and let it go, and it shows up in a couple of days. So just like, you know.
Oh, you want a back issue? Well, there's a bazillion ways to get it in 24 hours from eBay.
Right. Well, I used to get desperate, like sweating almost. It's like, oh man, I don't have this one. You know, I'm not going to see this again for a year if I don't get it now. So I had to get into some heavy negotiations, and I only had so much money, right? And you learn to like walk around the whole place because you'd buy a book for $60.
You get stuck at that first table and you'd be like empty. Like, it's hard to separate from the first table and go to like see the other ones if there's a bunch of stuff you like, right? You kind of want to carry everything you want with you. Don't sell any of these. I'm going to go check to see if I can get it cheaper somewhere else, but hold these for me.
Right. And cutting your fingers on the Mylar. Back when they first started getting Mylar, it was like so sharp that we cut our hands.
I remember visibly like shaking, like, because I was so excited because some of the things that I was seeing, like, there's so many. I've never seen a place that had so many comics for like, and the prices seemed cheaper than my local comic book store at like the convention. And I'm like, oh, I just got so excited. It's really sad that this was just a couple of weeks ago. But no, it's the same thing as when I was a kid. I literally did go to a comic book show a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, "This is amazing." it's ASM. Was it the Hobgoblin first appearance, and it has the tattoos. I'm like, I couldn't put it down. I'm like, somebody's gonna take this if I set it down to look at another comic, you know?
Right. I remember buying that issue, and I have it here at home.
That was a crazy run too, wasn't it? With like the way that they kind of hid the identity.
It's Roderick Kingsley. No, it's Ned Leeds. No, it's Flash Thompson. It's like, dude, what are you doing? And then, you know, what's interesting is like, that was getting good. You know, Mary Jane was coming back, and it was like getting good after being a little weird and slow for a while.
And then seems like Spider-Man does go through phases of like really exceptionalness, and then some weirdness.
Yeah. Yeah. They had this one weird issue in the middle, like the kid who liked Spider-Man that was kind of like artistic and was like a handicapped kid that was dying, right? And Spider-Man showed him his identity, which I incidentally got my first double cover ever. I got that. So reading that. And then right through this, there's Hobgoblin stuff's like, right, coming to a head. And I have, gosh, I think it's sitting right here. I have that book, that issue that I have. It's just sitting here on the floor. I think it's just sitting on the floor. Yes, this one right here. It's just sitting. There's my actual one.
Oh yeah. I like that. That's a great one.
So it's here's a couple more that I had.
But I just recently got the Silver Sable one too.
There you go. Yeah. So this comes out, and then it's this was the newsstand. I think this is the newsstand copy. I got this one, so I had a double copy of this one, so that's why I got it slabbed. But it's there's a van that crashes. The Hobgoblin's unmasked, and I'm like, wow, this is going to be great. I'm going to find out something about the Hobgoblin. There's like all these things, but then it's like the next issue. This is 251. So 250 through, they threw all that out the window. He comes in a black suit from the Secret Wars event that there were posters all over the comic book store saying there's going to be Secret Wars. There's going to be Secret Wars. Well, all we know is that there was a Secret Wars and Spider-Man came back in a black suit, and the whole Hobgoblin story was on pause for a while. I was like, wait, what? Like, what just happened? Like, where is there a black suit? And people forget that the black suit was actually a copy of the Spider-Woman suit at the time, the Julia Carpenter suit, right?
I forgot that. I don't know that.
That's what it looked like, right? That was her suit. It was a clone of that. And he'd seen that and saw Thor get his suit patched up, and it became alive after a few issues, and that was fun. But it like derailed all that we were thinking about, like all the stuff that was building up to that. And they had the Rose story and stuff, and it was just really fun to see that and to go through that back when it was like earth-shattering stuff. Like people could still die. Like if somebody died in a comic book, you'd be like, whoa, this guy died. We didn't have any expectation they were returning.
One of the coolest things I think that I liked about Marvel was just like the thing that made it a little bit different was I felt like more relatable characters, things like Chris Claremont's run on the X-Men was a good example of like, you can do things that aren't like, you can kill off major characters, right? It was like a little bit different. It was the first step into like that feeling of like, hey, not everything's protected for you, kid. Sometimes you're going to see stories that don't end nicely, or cleanly. And it was kind of, Spider-Man's a good example of that too. That's I think why maybe I found myself more identifying with the Marvel titles, but not. I will say I'm not giving DC its due because I didn't give them much of a chance. I got to admit, like I probably didn't put enough legwork into it, but I did just feel an affinity for like most of the Marvel characters. I also love the crossover aspects where you can that was like not only good for them to like make more money, but it would expose me to comics that I didn't necessarily know about. And then I'd read them because, the Busey Massacre is over here. I got to go read this episode of Thor or something,
Yeah, in the 90s, they crossed over Marvel and DC. In fact, this is an interesting one. This book here, this Justice League, I just happen to have it here, is the first time Spider-Man appeared in any DC comic.
Oh my God.
It doesn't look like much.
He's not even on the cover.
Yeah. Well, it's a little bit of a trick because let's see if I can find it. And this is
an ad from Marvel. Well,
it is a Halloween suit. I believe. And so it's a Halloween episode or Halloween issue. And let's see if I can find it for you. And in it, here he is. The Spider-Man shows up like right here. And they call him, you can see, they call him Web Slinger. Oh, it's backwards to you guys, but it says, it reads, this bargain basement web slinger, it reads right here, Batman is. It says, this bargain basement web slinger has all the powers of the real thing without saying the words Spider-Man. And then it reads, if he snares me in that sticky netting, I'm finished. So here's Batman admitting that
tiptoeing around the licensing.
Exactly. Yeah. Playing a little game. And then he's like, these are guys in Halloween costumes that have been given the power of the people in the costumes that they're wearing for this one episode. And then there's a guy called, I think his name is, here's a Commando America. right here. If you want to, it's his name.
I like how his uniform's super baggy too. It's like
Exactly. Well, he can't be as
like
buffed out
Captain
as the
America would
Flash.
ever wear. That's what Captain America looks like if I'm wearing the suit.
Exactly.
Which is funny because I did go as Captain America as Halloween not last year, 2 years ago when Halloween existed.
Mm-hmm. I ran a 5K.
Actually, I bought a. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say I ran a 5K race in a Captain America suit, and quickly realized that shield is no joke. Like you cannot run. I mean, my leg was like bruised from whacking myself with a plastic shield, and the wind resistance was nuts. Like you just can't It's like hard. I have a whole lot
your
of more
shield
respect
wasn't
for
made of vibranium. I'm sure
right,
vibranium cuts the wind to the point where you wouldn't even feel it. It's also light as a feather.
naturally.
So don't give them too much credit. I'm pretty sure the shield took care of a lot of the heavy lifting. Literally.
What were we gonna say?
No, I was gonna say I bought like a high-end Captain America suit to go at the time. Like what's funny is I had short hair back then, and it was right during the not Endgame, but the movie Infinity Wars, right? So Chris Evans is in the theater and he's got long hair and a beard, and I'm like, now that's me. But back then I got short hair and no beard, so I'm going as like Captain America circa some earlier Avengers film. But like I was so proud of it. It was like an expensive suit. I got it off eBay. Like I bought it a year before, right after Halloween, so you get it cheap. I had the shield, had gloves, had straps and everything. It was great.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then what I did is while we were like going around, we'd be going from like we do a progressive sometimes where it's just you go from house to house and have a quick drink and some food at each person's house in the neighborhood.
Oh, fun.
About 4 or 5 different houses we'd hit. But when we were walking in the streets and stuff, I would just play like the Avengers theme music on a small speaker while I was walking.
That's great.
It was just like hidden in my, like I just, anytime I wanted to, I could just hit a button and it would just start playing the Avengers theme song.
That's great.
So I could say something and for effect, play the Avengers theme song to the point where I was probably annoying most of the people around me.
I would say, would you say that, because I want to get through some of these questions here before we wrap up, would you say that you are that person that is like collects comic books to all your friends? Like everybody knows you as the comic book guy within your circle of friends?
I think they probably forgotten it's one of those things where there was a long period of time where I was like kind of the comic book guy. I was the computer guy. I was the comic book guy. I guess this might broach into a second story that I actually
let's have it.
That I think was just kind of interesting because growing up, I didn't really have like a lot of, like my father wasn't really around very much, so I really didn't have like a great father figure to kind of instill a lot of the morals and different things that that you need when you're growing up as a kid. And I was just kind of do stupid things sometimes because I just didn't know better. And I do honestly think, like to a certain extent, like I did gain some of my my general sense of morality from comic books. It was one of these things where I started collecting. I'd read a lot of these books, and there'd be these characters. Like I was a huge X-Men fan. I like see like the kind of duality of some of these characters that were kind of like not your cookie cutter good guys. Because I never think, like, I probably would have never fit in as Captain America as my idol when I was growing up, because I was doing dumb things and I wasn't exactly perfect, right? So seeing some of these more flawed characters that actually were trying to do the right thing was like probably a subconscious motivation for me to like kind of clean up my life in certain ways. Things you don't notice it, like it's not something that's super tangible at once, but I just love these stories and I love the concept of these, being a hero. And I used to read a lot of G.I. Joe comics, and I used to read a lot of like, and Spider-Man was a wonderful example. And they still get chills when I think of just like something as stupid as the, with great power comes great responsibility, right? It seems like, maybe it's cheesy or whatever, but it just feels right. It just is always one of those things that kind of sticks with you,
It's only
So
cheesy
as a
now, right?
yeah,
It wasn't cheesy then.
right. No, I mean it made sense, and I just think it's interesting. I hear it is a secondary story. Like I can remember a time. This is probably when I'm like 17, and I was with some of my friends, and I remember there was a situation. We'd been out, like going, having fun, whatever, at party, and one of my friends was throwing a party, and one of my friends was also, you know, he was kind of like the like to fight kid. so
Oh, geez.
so he was
Yeah.
kind of like, and the guy who was throwing the party was actually like another one of my friends, but not as good of a friend as the other one. I like to call him, he's our Stifler, right? If you ever watch American Pie,
Yes,
right? So I
yes,
have the
yeah.
Stifler friend. He kind of loved, but he's kind of a jerk, but it, this time he was being a real big jerk. It was one of these situations where the guy who was throwing the party was like went on a date or something with his ex-girlfriend, and he was steamed about it, and then for no good reason he's trying to pick a fight, and it was like an unfair fight to begin with, and it had no rational reason. He was just doing it for the wrong reasons. And it was one of those moments where you're kind of like, am I going to stand back and let this happen? Like, I know it's not fair what's going to happen to my one friend, but my better friend's going to do it. Do I just stand back because, you know, because that's what people do sometimes. And this is one of those moments where I just kind of like manned up, and it was just kind of like I got in front of him and I said, this isn't right. You can't do this to him. He hasn't done anything. And then that friend wanted to fight me. And then my second friend,
Whoa.
who is also the kid that I grew up with, and he's also the comic book collector. He came up behind me and said, no, don't do this. This isn't right. And the two of us got him to back down. And I just remember that it was like a small little thing at an age where you're like 16, 17, when you aren't doing the right thing a lot of the time. And it was one of those moments where, for a change, everything kind of like you stood for the right thing, and you stopped something bad from happening. And that was kind of maybe the first moment of like a directional shift in my life. And it was like after
Yeah.
that, I started to like think more about like doing the right thing more often, and like you would pay more attention. Like if somebody gave you too much change, I started to give it back. That's another weird moment. There is just like, here, you overpaid me. The first time I did that, and I didn't even think about it, I remember thinking, hey, something's changed. I'm now doing the right thing without even thinking about doing the right thing. And then, later on, I wound up, I'm a criminal justice major, and
Oh, wow.
I wanted to like be a police officer. And then I found out I have pretty bad color vision. So I actually, after I got out of college, as a criminal justice psychology major, I wound up joining the infantry. I actually joined the army, and they wouldn't let me in there either because color vision. But they gave me a waiver if I'd be willing to do. Well, actually, I scored high on the test, so they were like, "Why would you want to be an infantry soldier? You don't have to be. There's all these other jobs you could do." And I'm like, "I'm going to join the army. I want to do something that, honestly, probably something that a hero would do from a comic book, right?" And I wound up forcing them to give me, like, basically I wasn't going to join unless I got a waiver. So they give me a waiver to get in the infantry. I did 3 years as an infantry soldier, and I got to like feel like I served. I do think certain part of that is due to like comics. I think I owe so definitely a part of my morality was groomed by Marvel.
That's really interesting you say that. I have similar experiences where you're reflecting. I remember the issues of Spider-Man where he found a notebook that had been turned golden by, I think, the Beyonder. And this whole building was turned. He saved this notebook, and he was gonna save it, and like all the stuff he could do with this, and then no one was gonna miss it, and it was trash. And there's this big morality play in the book, and then the Black Cat finds it, takes it, and she makes these gold epaulets out. She's like, sweet, And I was like, I don't understand why that's bad. Like I was trying to like resolve it in my head from like a neutral perspective, and it made me want to read like Kant and like David Hume and things like sort of like trying to understand like what is moral, right? And it talks about, there's like famous like streetcar thing. Would you like shift the
Oh
streetcar from
yeah,
running someone else over if it
right.
runs a
Like,
bunch of people over? And it plays with you a
oh
little
yeah,
bit. And I
it,
remember
it,
that
it
I found out about university, like I didn't know anything about college. I had never met a person, or even, I don't think the words college came up in my house when I was a kid. Never, like the words weren't uttered at all. But then I saw that Peter Parker had gone to this, now I know to be a fictional university, called Empire State University. And I thought,
I've seen it in Spider-Man, the video game.
there you go. And like, this is like, there's more school after high school. I'm like, this whole thing just like came to me, you know? So I model, and for a long time, I was younger than Peter Parker. And then I was about the same age for longer than I probably should have.
Everybody at one time was younger than Peter Parker.
Right. And then I became older than Peter Parker.
Right.
And then I was even younger than the early Peter Parker, who was like 14.
I think Peter Parker's like 26 right now. I'm pretty sure. It's like,
yeah,
he's perpetually 20 something.
Right. And I'm thinking, man, this is like, I wanted to go to Empire State University until I embarrassed myself with a counselor and found out there isn't.
That's awesome.
Place,
Hey, you know what? It got you thinking about college.
Right. And I thought, well, should they have one? It sounds like a great place, you know? And so I learned this stuff. I learned about what these things mean about the world, the larger world in this context, and about behavior in this context too. Just like, I think much like you did, you know, but
yeah. I mean, I was lucky. I was at least able to leech on to some of these ideas and like see the value in them. You know, I don't know if that's, I think that might be my gift in life, was always just that if I see something that I liked, I'd be able to like understand that might be something good to emulate. If I found a friend that was like a good friend, I tend to like become like, you know, stick with those friends. I still have the same friends from high school, the handful of friends that I've loved since I was a little kid, you know, and it's been a godsend, you know.
Yeah. I'll ask you one last question here. I'm going to try to wrap it up before 7, but sure. Can you tell me how is the state of the comic book industry today compared to when you were your heyday of the late 80s and early 90s? Do you think that it's dying? Do you think it's sustainable? Do you think it's going to be here in 20 years? What do you think?
Which direction do you want me to take this? I think that, like, I mean, it's a lot different now than it was when I was growing up. I think the collector aspect of it is probably one element, like the whole idea of like, hey, then let's buy up as many variant covers as we can. Like that kind of like saddens me. It's like, is it a library or is it an art museum? Is a lot of the feeling I get sometimes, right? Because it's kind of both in some ways, right? I get like, hey, this artwork is amazing. There's some covers. I know I bought quite a few comics just because the damn cover art was so great. And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. As a matter of fact, if you get a book that you never read and you encapsulate it because you loved the art, that makes sense to me too. You know, it's like, hey, I'm just protecting the artwork. I'm not going to leave this thing out there. But it seems like a sad state too, to know that like some people aren't reading what's inside. So there's two sides of it, right? And I think sometimes this modern era, you know, it's harder, I think, a little bit. There's so many different books, so many different, you know, it's like when I think in a way when I was younger, it was like, hey, you just collected everything, right? And you could afford it a little bit easier. Now there's a lot more prints, so you got to be more selective. And if you got it, you got it, and that was great because then later on maybe it had value. But now it might be like, oh, you didn't buy the like third variant cover that was like the least printed one. So it makes me a little sad to I know that it's kind of getting a little fragmented there. But like I said, there's like, you got like, it's a library. It can be a great book. The stories can be amazing. And there's like the angle where sometimes like, oh my God, this artist is amazing. I recently bought a plaque Moon Knight just because it looked like Todd McFarlane's work. I'm like, oh my God, there's a guy. Is this Todd McFarlane? No, it's not Todd McFarlane. It's this other guy. I forget his first name, but his last name was Platt. And it's just an amazing art cover, right? Maybe the comic's good too. But I gotta admit, I never read that one. That was like one of the first comics I've ever bought, which was purely for the artwork. But you know, I think is it going to be something that like the younger kids are going to be into? I think the fact that these Marvel movies are like actually being so potentially, you know, I think they're influencing a generation. I mean, I can't imagine that there aren't going to be some kids that come over to the comic side just because they want to see more stories that are about these characters they've fallen in love with, you know? So I do think there's definitely some, in some ways, we didn't have that. I mean, the movies that came out when we were kids that were in the comic book movies were garbage.
I couldn't tell you like how could not imagine this today. I always told my friends, like, do you want to see this Fantastic Four movie or X-Men movie? And I said, did you see the Captain America movie that came out like 1991? They're terrible. They cannot make a good, I mean, it makes people hate comic books because they're so bad. And they think we're really stupid or for collecting these things, but they're not. I said, no. That true to life, like translation of what we read to the screen, I think started with, the first X-Men movie. They didn't quite know how to do that. They sort of slow played Wolverine's powers, because X-Men for a long time is just a Wolverine show.
Right.
So it is. And then they got the Iron Man. And I thought that's an interesting choice because I actually interviewed my friends. I go, what's Superman's real name? And they'd say Clark Kent, or a few people would say Kal-El. What's Spider-Man's real name? And most people got it. Like, what's Iron Man's real name? Not a clue.
Wow. Right? Yeah. I mean, Tony Stark, I mean, is a household name now, right? Yeah. What they did for Iron Man through those movies, not just Iron Man, but the Avengers. Avengers were not the AAA title back then, or I'm not sure if maybe it grew because, like I said, there was a big span of time where I wasn't paying attention. But I'm pretty sure Avengers was just like, hey, stagnating, and those movies revitalized it. Certainly Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, yeah. Which was a fun kind of tongue-in-cheek book.
Right.
And they made a fun tongue-in-cheek movie. And I thought,
I get the feeling like the director actually read the comic.
Yeah, you really do. You really sense that these people embody the soul of this. Where I watch the DC movies and I say, well, this is a group of people fulfilling a contractual obligation.
Yeah.
Right?
One of my favorite things about when they cast Tony Stark was, when Robert Downey Jr. was like, he wanted the role. Not because he wanted, I mean, he was a little bit down and out, obviously, at the time, but he had this life that kind of mirrored some of the elements of the Tony Stark character. And he was a fan of the comic and he was a fan of the character. I remember him saying, like, if they want to make 3 of these movies, I'm going to do, I'll keep doing it. And he was true to his word and he has a passion for that character and it shows. He nailed it, right? Like, and now he's a household, like, people can't help but like if you're like a Amazing Fantasy, what is it? Trying to remember if you're like a Iron Man #1 holder, you should write a letter.
Yeah,
because Robert Downey Jr. tripled the value of your comic.
Yeah, that is. Let's see. That is Tales of Suspense 39. Is that?
Yes,
book.
That's it.
Yeah, and I think I have one right here. So there's a bunch of Spider-Man stuff. I actually do have one right here somewhere. I don't know where I put it.
I just happen to have that comic book, like, right here within arm's reach.
Yeah, it really is. I don't know where I put it, but it's.
Which is, I even love the fact that in that movie, that first Iron Man outfit that he builds looks like that horrible Iron Man outfit from that comic. It's like, hey, there it is. It's like, hey, if I was going to design Iron Man in the 1960s, this is what it would look like.
Right. Yeah, totally. Exactly. And that he did. Yeah, they captured that. They did a great job. It started the right way. It ended the right way. And he even said, I am Iron Man. I'll never forget that movie. My kid, he was like 7 or 8.
He's one of the first heroes who told his identity too. Like,
right. Publicly he became like Secretary of Defense. Right. And then, so my son was watching him, like, he said, I'm doing a piece for Vanity Fair because there's this woman saying is a Vanity Fair and they have like this love scene in there. And he goes, oh man, Iron Man's having a kissing fight with that woman. He said, because he thought he didn't know what like a love scene was. So he said, he called it a kissing fight. And we're like, oh.
How old is he?
He's like 7 or 6 at the time. And he was like, they're having a kissing fight. I go, your mom will explain that one to you.
Yeah. It was funny. You're right. Iron Man has a couple of scenes in there that are a little bit like you wouldn't see him in a modern Marvel film. You're still trying to find like exactly where's the line.
Yeah, exactly. Well, once Disney bought it too, changed, right?
Yeah. 2 of my daughters are old enough to like, I believe that they like the movies. The youngest, she just likes whatever her sisters like, but they love those movies. I got 2 daughters that are huge Marvel fans. Like I said, I told you that one time they both of them wound up being Stan Lee, and they're like their fifth grade. You got to do a presentation where you got to emulate somebody and tell a story. And they were dressed up as Stan Lee, and they had like billboards and signs and comics. I have a Stan Lee signed comic they brought in to show people. It was so cute. I'm just saying, like so is it affecting like the younger generation? It absolutely is, right?
Yeah.
The comic book or the movie that kind of does it. I got both of my girls reading comics, so
and maybe in a secondary way, because I keep saying it's dying, going away because the soul is dying because reading. But you know what? Back to the Future was what, 35, 36 years ago?
I was shocked to know that a DeLorean was only a 3-year-old car in that movie. In my mind, it was like, hey, look, they got a really old DeLorean. It was invented in 82. The movie came out in 85.
Right.
Like,
right. I took my kid to the Twin Pines Mall last year in California.
Oh,
and
that's
went to
great.
Doc Brown's house.
The Solo Pines Mall, or
it's the Lone Palm Mile at the end. It's Twin Pines at the beginning because he crashed into Old Man Rutherford's one of the 2 trees because he was trying to breed pine trees. Remember, he had this idea,
right?
Breed trees, and so I mean that holds a lot for us. Like, do we? One year I dressed up as Doc and Marty with one of my kids, and so that holds a lot of magic for us. And that's just one show, and there are, hundreds of thousands of comic books to draw on to perpetuate this, even if we're not reading them, right?
Yeah, like I love that. That's one of the things. It's like you've got the most like deep library of stories to pull from. Like that's the great thing is like they've been doing such a good job, at least Marvel has, with like selecting the right titles to like take elements of. I love the way that the television stuff's working too, because they're doing a pretty good job with like these television pieces. They're grabbing elements of a comic and then they don't make it exactly the same, so that you don't have this one guy ruin everything for everyone, right? Like me.
Yeah.
I know how this is going to end because I read the comic book. Right?
They
always twist it around, it's always a little different. So they keep people guessing. It energizes the comic book market in some ways because like if this new character comes out, we got to go get the comic book because it's going to be worth more, right?
Right.
The stories, you got like a vast catalog of like great stories that you can pick from. Sometimes it's like sad when you see like a great story that was in a comic, and I remember they made a Punisher movie that was based off the comics. I think it was like Garth Ennis Punisher run that was really good, and the movie just didn't hold the water. So you're kind of like, oh well, sometimes you don't nail it right, but so far everything in this Marvel Cinematic Universe has been pretty spot on, or at least if they changed it a little bit, most people feel like they changed it for the better.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't even like get hardcore fans like griping too much about anything there.
Right. I try not to be that one guy that says like, oh, this would never happen. That can't be. I mean, I very intentionally don't say this stuff when I go. And I'm the guy who dresses up like you do. But the Spider-Man suits are a little more skin tight. I remember the first time I went to one, I dressed up, and it was in Florida. It's really hot.
We dressed up, me and my daughter, but we did like the Star Wars when the new Star Wars films came out. That was our first cosplay thing. She was Rey Skywalker at about 9 years old, and I was Obi-Wan with my beard.
Oh, fun.
It was just awesome, so these whole elements, these type of things are just, you as Spider-Man would be great. I love it. I got the same build.
I have a lot of photos there, and back then I had a little more weight on me, and I was in there, and one of the girls that worked at the theater said, "It looks like Spidey hit the donut shop on the way." And my friend said, "Aren't you embarrassed by this?" I said, "Look, man, first of all, I'm in a state I don't live in, and I'm wearing a mask, and ain't nobody know who I am. Second of all, nobody puts on a skin-tight leotard that runs around outside who has any sense of shame, like at all. Like you can't, that has to be left behind, right? Like you can't take the shame with you."
Right. Like one of my favorite things is like, if I'm doing stuff with my daughter and she's not afraid to do it, I do find like, hey, if she's willing to do it, I'm willing to do it. I'm going to show you a picture. Maybe it'll show up. I don't know.
Please do.
All right. This one's, maybe I can just.
I can't quite.
Let me send. Hey, this one's cute. I think I gotta get a picture of it. I can share it using.
Oh, share your screen.
Yeah, I was trying to like do it through this, but of course. While I was looking at your website, one of the funny things I enjoy about your website is that there's a template to a different website that yours has been built on.
Yeah.
And every once in a while I stumble upon like the tail end of it where it's like or like a piece that's still there from something else. It's
right.
Because your global supply chain infrastructure is like
I know I paid some guy a lot of money for that.
It's a brilliant web. I think the website design is great. It's just, they made somebody's website and now they're using that as the template and they're like kind of creeping things in and out.
Right.
It's still cool. Don't get me wrong. All right. I got it. Comic fan. I got like pictures of, see if I can. Okay. So how do I share here?
The bottom, there's a green arrow up when you shake your mouse around towards the bottom.
There we go.
Share.
There we go. I'm going to share this one. Share.
Oh, wow. How fun. Oh my God. We have a Wicket too.
Yeah, we do.
That's adorable.
That's my middle's Darth Vader, but female version. My poor wife who's humoring me.
Oh, that is adorable.
Wait, we got the live version.
Great.
And then
that is so sweet.
There's another one that I thought was kind of cute. This one here. So we went to the this was at the Spider-Man. This was a Marvel exhibit that was at the Detroit. Where's the museum? The
Museum of Art or Metropolitan Museum of Art?
No, actually it was done. You just mentioned it when we talked last time. I think you're thinking it there. Henry Ford Museum.
Green. Oh yeah, the Henry Ford, and then
so they did an exhibit there. We went there and they had all these like real life size versions of the different characters. This obviously was like right at the tail end of COVID here, where we were able to get it open something finally.
Oh wow, that is exceptionally cute, actually.
Yeah, the last one is a sad picture of me in my Captain America suit.
Oh wow, cute. That's fun too, though. You know what? I love it, man.
Yeah. So that was like, sometimes I think it's just fun to just bring your family into the whole thing. You never know. It's been one of those things where he's my cat.
I'll show you real quick a few pictures of my. Let's see if I can do it. Share.
I think some of those memories too are like so like profoundly fun for me. Like,
my kids. When my son was like 2, and here he is shooting his phaser, and then I did that, and then that's him. There we are a little bit later.
Nice, good. So it's not all just comic book,
right?
Although this is a comic book, but I feel like.
Right. Let's see if I had another. Oh, here we go. We're at the Mario Brothers stuff. We had.
Oh, it's just so good.
Yeah, it's like, great stuff.
Like stuff you live for now, right?
Right. I look back and my kids are like, Dad, I don't want to do it with you anymore. That's the stupid thing. Oh, here, I'll show you. Actually, this is a better one from just a few years ago. I'll show you this one really quickly. If I can share this one here. So I have. Here's some of them I did with them. I did.
Oh God, she's such a huge Harry Potter fan.
Okay.
I bought her the Todd McFarlane Harry Potter action figures.
Oh wow! Oh, those are a little extreme, but yeah, I think if I remember correctly.
That's great.
This is our foster daughter here, and then there's me and my son is Captain America. And here I am later.
So good.
And then here we are. Look.
Those are the best.
Yeah, and most of these are on Halloween too, so they're not just running around.
Yeah, like we definitely have had some Halloween. It's just funny how I managed to like trick them into like doing it after Halloween. Oh no way, I love that car.
Yeah, that's awesome. The kids were driving a DeLorean, and was my wife like patiently putting up with us. She's
the poor person who has to like send all the stuff. I think her name's Heather, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep, it's Heather, and then she's the one boxing up
she
stuff.
Sends this stuff out. So,
that's her.
I'm pretty sure. I'm like, that's probably his wife.
It is my wife. Yeah, here's my little Marty McFly with a calculator.
Oh, that's so good.
are at a comic show, and there's me.
Oh, no
Spock,
way.
yeah, and my wife. So
I just, I,
the three of
my
us as
kids love
Ant-Man
this stuff too.
shrinking.
That was my favorite, maybe. The best part is like you get three different people in that, but nobody would know. It's like, oh,
Well,
no.
I'm getting a warning here. It's gonna. I get my 1 hour is almost up here, so I
Okay.
gotta like call it good. Do you want to say anything? Last words you want to say?
No, I guess I probably got. I mean, I don't know. This stuff is something I haven't been doing in a long time. It's one of those things where, yeah, honestly, the resurgence in the comic book market, as far as like kind of like drug me, like, well, let me look at my old collection, right? It was the thing. It wasn't the money of like how much they've gone up, because I haven't sold a dang thing, and I don't really have any desire to. But what happened is I looked at the old collections and I kind of started pulling things out and rereading things, and next thing you know, it was like an infectious disease, and now I'm like back on this path again, looking for all the local comic book shops, trying to find out when the new conventions are coming in, and I love it. It's been something. And you know what else has like got me out of this, like, oh, I'm not looking at, oh, what's going on with COVID, what's going on with the economy, what's going, all the bad news stuff that I've been like obsessed with over the last few months, years, whatever. Like, I'm not sitting here like fretting over that stuff. I'm actually enjoying, and exposing my kids to like some really great stories and some great, memories that I had.
Well, I'm glad to hear it, Chris. Thanks for coming on the show, and I hope you'll consider doing it again sometime.
Yeah, no, this is fun.
All
Really
right,
enjoyed it. All
all right,
right.
man. Take care. All right.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye, Rick.